And we're going to talk a little bit about Graham Potter, because it's rumoured that he's going to be in for the Sweden international manager's job. Is that the perfect environment for him to rebuild, or is it a little bit too early to start going back into the Scandinavian football?
Too early for me. Listen, I know he has history there. I know that's where he came from football-wise. But I said to you guys during the break, he needs to just take his dough for the moment, sit and wait for the right job, whether it be the England job, whether it be if the Brighton manager gets a bigger job, that might be a great fit for him to go back to Brighton. I rate him so highly. I think, with all due respect to the Swedish fans out there, that job's below him right now at this stage in his career with how young he is.
Well, they haven't qualified for the next major tournament, the Euro 2024,
Graveyard.
so he's not going to be able to play.
They need that job.
Is he someone that should be considered at a Premier League team the next time a job comes available?
Yes, I think it'd be very harsh with everything going on at Chelsea, with the changes, with the new ownership, the amount of signings, to judge him on that small period of time.
So what sort of level should he come back in at?
I still think anywhere in the Premier League. You can go top 10, top 15. Every club in the Premier League nowadays, they're all big clubs, bar maybe the 2 or 3 who are coming up to go down again. He should be up for any job that comes up that's, say, not a top 4 job at the moment. He's going to have to rebuild his reputation a little bit. Like I said, the right fit for him would probably be Brighton if the Brighton manager jumped to a so-called bigger job. But I just think, he doesn't need to go to Sweden. Or he sits out and waits for Southgate to maybe fluff his lines in another major tournament semi-final and steps in there if Southgate moves on.
He was rumoured as a possible Manchester United manager if Ten Hag moved on.
No.
Would you include him in that list?
No, not at all. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, Sweden are 23rd in the FIFA rankings, so they're not an inconsequential side. So he's not going to a footballing backwater. But I don't see the upside in that for him. I don't see why a domestic manager that's built himself a decent reputation, started off by being at Ostersands and that shock outcome against Arsenal in a game, built a reputation, came into Swansea, got into Brighton. Everything that Brighton touched at this moment in time is going wonderfully well. Even his departure got them 20 million quid. He goes into Chelsea, and it was always going to be a challenging situation for him, new ownership model. The fallout with Tuchel, which I think was justified. Tuchel's behaviour brought about a reaction from the owner, which would have brought about a reaction from most owners. If he'd have behaved that way with any owner, irrespective of his achievements previously, I think he'd have got his walking papers. And then compound that with some poor starts in the beginning of the season, and you've got little currency with a new ownership. Potter, for me, look, if you can make a case for Gary O'Neill to get the Wolves job, then you can make a case for Graham Potter to have a Premier League job. Do I think he's a top 6 Premier League manager? Probably not. But do I think there are opportunities that will come his way that are probably more fitting? And Brighton may well be it. There's an irony about football. There was no ill will between Potter and Brighton. He would be still probably the Brighton manager now if Chelsea hadn't come and poached him.
I'll ask you in a minute why you think that Roberto De Zerbi is so certain to move on. I'll come back to that in just a second. But let me ask you about Graham Potter and whether you would think that, bearing in mind that Roy Hodgson, we don't know how long he's going to be around in terms of how long he's going to be at the football club anymore. I mean, should not Crystal Palace be thinking about him in their long-term planning?
Well, absolutely, he'd be in the conversation.
Would that be difficult because of his relationship with Brighton?
You've had that before. You had Alan Mullery manage Brighton and go and manage Palace. It's not like you've had Stevie Coppell. I fired him from Palace. He ends up going to manage Brighton. It's the way that the world works.
We're in the 21st century now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if people want to make it about that, they can make it about. And it's not quite like George Graham leaving Arsenal to go to Tottenham in that time where the raging rivalry between Tottenham and Arsenal is different. I mean, albeit Brighton and Palace have a pretty serious rivalry. Look, I think he should be in a conversation. The times that I've spoken to him, I think he's a very bright fella. I think he's a very forthright fella. I think he stands his ground. I was disappointed with some of the things that he was saying when he was in Chelsea's dugout, and I thought from the outset, this is going to be a difficult job for you. I'm not sure that you've got... There was an argument made by Ibrahimovic recently about Ten Hag having not experienced managing big players. But he managed a Dutch team that had decent players in it, in a league that has expectations of Ajax. But even he is struggling with the Man United situation. What chance would Graham Potter have coming from a very well-run, very organised, but not so much focused on Brighton, to a Chelsea side just being taken over for the world's biggest purchase of a football club, with an American owner telling everybody that he's not screwing around and spending money like a drunken sailor.
Bedlam for a new manager. Bedlam.
Yeah.
You know?
So yes, I think he'll get back in the job, and I don't think he needs. I mean, how much of a rumour and how much reality is this? I don't know, but I would be surprised if Graham Potter ends up as Sweden's manager.
Well, the Swedish FA Secretary General Andrea Morleberg confirmed that Potter is among the names under consideration.
Well,
so
that's fine,
it's not.
Would they be paying millions?
But that's their consideration.
It won't be great money, will it? Not international
but that's their
football.
consideration, not his. I don't suppose he's
got
got his
enough from
agent
Chelsea
throwing
bill.
his hat in the job for the Sweden job.
That's a poor story for me.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen.
Okay. You said that Roberto De Zerbi, or you seem convinced Roberto De Zerbi will end up moving on to other things. Why?
I just think it's a course of action. It's what Brighton do. They bring through talent, whether it's manager or players, and for the right price, they'll move on. It's what makes them a great club. That don't stand in people's way. You know, clubs that size, you stand in people's way, it becomes a problem to keep recruiting people like that. So I think eventually, it might not be this season, he will go to a so-called bigger club. That's just the evolution of football.
It's not so clear now where the vacancy might lie, because I don't see him as a Manchester United manager, but you know, I would have seen him as a Tottenham Hotspur manager in a different guise, but they've got one in there. They've got a live one in there now, and I think Postecoglou, I don't think Tottenham will win the league, but I think they're going to have an impressive season, which is what I thought to have in the first place. And it'll be interesting to see where the vacancy might find itself, because if you look at the clubs at the top end of the division, they all look like they've got managers that are here for
what about Newcastle? They don't do the Champions League this year.
Yeah.
Let's say he doesn't win a cup. Let's say they finish 5th or 6th. Owned by the richest people in the world, or whatever else.
Pretty stable, though.
Understand that. They're stable till they're not, as regards results.
But they're ambitious,
and they're ambitious, and they want it all.
Let me ask you a question, because I make this observation, and it's in no way critical of Eddie Howe.
Sure.
I don't think he leads them to the ultimate promised land.
Sure.
In terms of the Saudis aren't here to participate; they're here to win the league. They're here to achieve something in English football.
He surprised you before, though.
Well, of course he surprised
I nearly
me.
hired him.
Of course he
I
surprised me.
flew in to interview him for the job at Peter when we were in the Championship, and he was League 2. He bottled it at the last moment. He'd agreed to come and see us. Yeah. I flew specifically in to see him.
Bottled it or changed his mind?
No, he basically thought, I can't, because it was obviously behind the owner's back. This was back in the day. And in the end, then he was worried about
that way, would you?
You know everyone.
So he's got a moral compass.
So he doesn't, because he'd agreed everything. And then obviously at the last moment was like, I better not do this and whatever. But I loved him from day one. I thought he was perfect.
Do you
for
think
us.
my point was,
do I think he'll win the Premier League title? No.
That's my point.
No.
Did you think he would get in the Champions League last season?
With the squad he had and took on, and so many of them are still from the previous regime of Steve Bruce, absolutely not.
So why can't he surprise you again?
I think he's a brilliant manager. I just think the competition with Klopp, Arteta, Man City, does he move the needle to pip them to the title? With what he's got right now, no. I'd like to see 2 more windows of recruitment, and then I'll answer the question better. Do I think he's a future England manager? Yes. Do I think he could go from Newcastle and manage a Man City? No, in my opinion. But I do rate him as a top-class coach.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. And that's the analysis. Every time, because people take criticism, people take a constructive observation which is laced with compliments, but not giving you the full 9 yards as some form of criticism. Yeah. There is no criticism in saying that Eddie Howe has done a wonderful job at Newcastle. They're a great team to watch. Yeah. They're in ascendancy, but likely he might be a gatekeeper for someone coming and picking up the trail that he's laid. That's not a criticism. It just happens to be a constructive observation,
and
which
also,
will be right or wrong.
Ultimately, that's what happens to everyone. No one stays forever, do they?
No.
I mean, especially in football, the average tenure is 18 months.
But they'd like to get a Klopp period out of him.
But the idea is that Klopp's been at Liverpool and been brought in and given 3.5 years to win a Premier League, which he duly did. Yeah. Didn't win very much for the first couple of years, got away with a $64 million smile that everyone liked.
Well, he got to a couple of finals.
And lost.
He was a serial loser. And they didn't stop there, but he went from being a serial loser to being a serial winner.
But they obviously noticed there was facets of him which could take them to the next level.
Oh, absolutely. No. But Liverpool's model is very different from other people's models, because Liverpool's model was they managed to buy people like Edison, and they managed, not Edison, Allison.
But that doesn't change the mentality of the coach, though, does it? The fact is that, a bit like Eddie Howe, he's got really close. He got to the final of the League Cup. He may well get them over the line.
You hadn't heard my argument. My argument was that Liverpool were only spend what they bring in. Coutinho paved the way for buying Virgil van Dijk.
Correct.
And Allison. Newcastle don't have that challenge. They'll try to stick within the confines of financial fair play, but the Saudis are not interested until they don't. And the Saudis are interested in doing one thing, which is doing precisely what they want, and that means providing the necessary funding to build Newcastle into a Premier League football club
and the
best in class.
Yep.
And that means spending a lot of money. And right now they're doing it on a basis of £150 million every season. That will soon escalate to 200.
I'd like to see 2 more windows for Eddie Howe.
Yeah.
Arguably, as financial fair play and that plan to keep within it actually helped Eddie Howe at this moment in time, because therefore the expectation has not been raised.
So you didn't have a Chelsea situation whereby Eddie Howe goes in there and suddenly they're spending 500 million and they got 20 players in the building. I think what's worked for him and his number two is they're very good man managers and good coaches, and they took a group of players who were down on their luck, bruised and battered from the previous regime, and they lifted them, and then they sprinkled in a few signings. They added a bit of quality to the squad. But if you look at who beat United 3-0 the other night, 7 of the 11 were under Steve Bruce that were there. So what he's done is he's given them the confidence to be the players they all thought they could be.
Play 2 fullbacks at centre half.
But they're not winning the title with that squad. But it doesn't mean in 2 windows' time they won't have a squad to win the title. The question is, can the manager win that title? I guess we'll find out. I'd like to see him given every opportunity because, again, I'm a massive fan.
Jason Tyndall is the number 2. Dresses very smartly.
Loves a picture.
Yep. Yeah,
and a sunbed.
I like Jason.
That's where I got the jacket from.
Great teeth. I'd like to know who his dentist is.
Absolutely. He loves a sunbed, I think, as well. Even that, he gets on a lot of breaks.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.